first. Yeah.
Okay, 1 second. Okay, so welcome to today's webinar, which is all about breathing, breathing techniques, the importance of breathing, obviously, and just a little bit about, where we come from as far as breathing from a more of a personal development standpoint. Obviously, we all know the importance of breathing, but obviously what we're going to be looking at today, hopefully, is different methods, different techniques that we can employ that will optimize our breath, use that breath to be able to feel more confident, feel more meditative, feel more at peace. So I'm going to throw this open to Victor initially, because he's got much more experience of breath techniques than I have. So I suppose my first question, Victor, really is, well, before that, hello, how you
Hello.
doing? Yeah, tell us a little bit about what do you do with clients as far as breath work is concerned?
With clients, simply we become conscious of breathing, and that itself is really really useful. Just putting our attention, our focus on our breath and breathing consciously. I start almost every session with, okay, let's breathe together, exhale, inhale, exhale. So there is no real magic, or it's not complicated at all. With the magic, if we want to say in it, that's just by putting our attention into our breathing, we become more present, we become more grounded. And I know that grounding, as in being present, getting out from our thoughts, is something that you incorporate in your practices as well.
Yeah, and I think whilst I don't ever consciously have this a set point where we'll breathe, I'll never get a client to necessarily start every session the same with breathing. When I pick up on the client getting a bit up in their in their system and up in their head, that tension rises up into the chest, and sometimes rather than a metaphysical dropping away from the thinking, like you say, it's good to just have a physical act, which is taking some deep breaths, because that always does work. It always does drop somebody back into themselves. It slows them down. So yeah, it's good to see that there are still physical techniques that we can do that have the desired effect, which is just to get it back to presence, back to the moment, back to the grounded place where we can see things more clearly.
Yes, and the good thing is in that if people don't have any understanding, or a client, and it's working for everyone. It's working because we are a human being, breathing and bringing our attention to somewhere, because very often what happens that we are caught up in our mind, in our story, and starting the session from there is not as efficient, in my opinion. So that's the reason why it's a little bit also, so there is an aspect of creating a habit, that we always start with that. We always start with grounding, with coming out of our head, and that's kind of building up the habit in them, like oh, okay, when I'm really caught up, I can come back to breathing. So that's not necessary. It's not necessary. So when you come to that, you can drop the whole thing, so the map is not the territory. It's like but it's also a good practice. Sometimes I just breathe, and because I think the fascinating thing in breathing is that kind of the bridge, or the connecting thread between the mind, the spirit, and the body. And if you were involved in martial arts, or I'm sure in acting too, it's like breathing it's a key element, and very often the first thing, or if not the first, but later on comes back as a key element. So yeah, in martial art, in many skills, they acknowledge the importance of breathing and being conscious, applying different breathing techniques and such.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's absolutely right. I think nearly every discipline that involves the physical body um, has some kind of take on breathing, because, like you say, it is so important and it can be optimized. It's not just. I think when we take it for granted, we're doing ourselves a disservice. We're missing out on a lot of things that could really be taken to a different level. You mentioned acting, especially when you're doing stage work. You need to project your voice to the back of the theatre, and without a good understanding of how your breathing works and strengthening that breathing, that's not going to happen. So it is a skill to learn as well in some respects. It's funny, when I first started down the path of sort of self-development and exploring different things, learning to breathe into the lower part of my body was a massive eye opener for me. It really changed how I started to be in the world, really, in a way. I know that sounds quite a big statement, but I think just practicing deep breathing on a regular basis and making that deep breathing my default way of breathing really slowed me down, really calmed me down, really helped me come from a much more calmer place in my life. And I do ascribe it, to that understanding of the importance of deep breathing that helped me to become more confident, less anxious in my day-to-day life. And even now, when I go into sort of situations that might be deemed sort of more stressful than others, that'll be something I focus on. It's quite instinctively now, is taking some deep breaths, along the way, making sure that I'm regulating my breathing, because it always helps. And the thing is, it needs to become a practice, because when you get anxious, it's almost like it's too late then. It's too late at that point to start breathing. You have to take yourself back, quite a few levels, quite a few steps. Whereas if you start to practice this default setting of deep breathing, of longer breaths, of holding it a little bit more in between breaths, you never get to that point necessarily, or you don't get to that point as quickly where you're feeling anxious, because the breath work takes that away from you.
Yes. Anxiety and emotions are a constructed thing. So it's like not just one faceted. There is a body element to it as well. And it's just simply the fact that if we breathe a certain way, or if we tired, so if we breathe up here shallow and fast, if we tired, if we, I don't know, have some kind of illness, or if we have, I don't know, something stress on the body, then we tend to go towards more distressful thoughts, and we experience more stressful feelings. I don't know if you ever experienced that. There is definitely a body element and as well. So I see the human beings more as kind of a multifaceted beings. Is like, and many of the coaching therapy practices like tackle different parts of the human being. Like I I was in home a months ago, and I had a massage session. I was given I get a massage session, and after that I just felt so zen. And it's interesting how you can kind of approach it like you relax your body, and emotions can come up and your mind can clear up, and it's just, everything is just it's so much easier and clearer, and you approached it from the body. Or you can approach it from the very kind of spiritual understanding of saying that what the three principle teach is that you can just see through the whole process of how we create our human experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't you 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 get change. I don't want to say similar or not similar change, but you get change. And I heard about teachers who do full body work, and the emotions and the thoughts kind of follow. And there are other teachers who do the whole mental thing, and the emotions and the body follow. So that's how I see us and the human beings.
Well, yeah, and all those things, no matter what the vehicle is, we're all going to this. They're all taking people to the same place, which is being present, which is not getting caught up in the self and just being part of a connection to the world. So I don't think it really matters necessarily what that vehicle is. I think you can get too dogmatic with things, and sometimes I've worked with clients and it will seem really like the right thing to do to have a deeper explanation about the human experience, about how life works, about how and the non-duality of life, and that helps them to sort of get connected with the flow of life and slow down and see things more clearly. Other times it might just be some breath work. It might just be getting a client to take some deep breaths and slow down, and that gets them open and connected back to the flow of life, and they can start to see things more clearly. So I don't really think one thing is better than the other. It's just what makes sense in that moment with that client, And I think when it's a new client or somebody you don't know that well yet, it's a lot quicker to just, and it's a lot quicker just to do some breathing exercises, because that gets them there in a quick way without them having to do a lot of because there's a danger when you start helping people drop out of their thinking, is that there's just a lot more thinking going on. It's almost like it's like almost counterproductive sometimes. Whereas with breathing, it's literally a release. You're releasing things, and I think I sort of have this visualization that I've developed now that I don't have to try for, but when I'm feeling a little bit het up and I do breathe out, I do feel like it's a real release of everything, of all the negative energy coming out of me, and it's relaxing it instantly. It's like I use this analogy a lot, so forgive me if I've said it before, but it's like modern life can make you feel like you're in the ocean trying to doggy paddle around, trying to keep afloat, and we just have to realize that we can just lie back and the ocean will keep us afloat automatically, that we don't need to do anything, that we are okay. And I think a releasing breath is like that, lying back in the ocean and realizing that the ocean will keep you afloat.
And also it's very interesting that the ocean itself, and I look at life like that. It's a wave. So like breathing is a wave. Inhale, exhale, and there is a little pause between them, or it seems like it's flowing into each other, or the seasons, or the life is sometimes up, sometimes down, but in another sense it's just in flow. So it's interesting how so look at breathing from that way, and the inhale is uh, is the yin, I guess. That's the like the sympathetic, right? The stress. So the inhale is the stress, and the exhale is the parasympathetic, then the yang. So that's like the release. And the reason I'm saying is that breathing is like the connecting thread in life, because that's the only thing which works involuntarily. So similar to the heart, we don't need to think about it, or we don't have to have intention. We keep breathing, but you can um, also breathe or control it voluntarily, consciously. So because of that, you can control the other involuntary functions, which is, for example, to be in a sympathetic, like stressed, pumped up state, or being in a parasympathetic, relaxed state.
Mm.
And for example, two probably well-known practices is the Wim Hof method, that's based more on the sympathetic stimuli, because what they do there is that they hyperventilate at the beginning, and then they stop breathing. So and that stimulates the adrenaline. So it's kind of a good kind of stress. There is much more to it, to the Wim Hof method. And for example, another technique is the triangle breathing. When you say you inhale for one count, so for one section. So for example, a count of four. Inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4, and you exhale for the double, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And what you will feel, it's like almost like they open a valve, like it releases the tension, so that opens or starts the parasympathetic functions in the body. And so these are a few examples how you can basically control or you can change your physiology through breathing.
Mm-hmm. Have you heard of the breathing exercise that helps you fall asleep within like 60 seconds?
Yeah, the 4-7-8.
Yeah. When I used to work in an office, the woman who I used to sit next to about 10 years ago taught me that, and it really works. You know, I often utilize it if I'm having a bit of a restless time falling asleep. And I've never known it not to work. It's crazy. I always think about it and do it thinking this isn't going to work because I'm too up in my head, and the next thing I know it's morning. So it does work. I mean, it might not be exactly 60 seconds, but you know, it really does work. And all you do, like Victor said, is you just breathe out all your air. So just one exhale, and then you just breathe in through your nose for 4, hold for 7 seconds, and then sigh it out with a sort of for 8 seconds. So it's in through the nose for 4, hold for 7, and then out through the mouth for 8. And it really works. You know, I can testify to that. Apparently, it's because the holding it for 7 seconds allows the oxygen to go around your body and slow you down and help you relax. So and of course the counting gets you out of your thinking. You know, you're focusing on the counting, therefore you're not in all the sort of stress about the day and stuff like that. So yeah, that's a technique I guarantee. Well, it works for me, definitely. So if you have trouble sleeping, try that one.
That's awesome. And it's also good to just de-stress. So whenever it's basically the principles are the same underneath. So that's a really good technique. For example, if you have blocked nose, then there is a technique to unblock. I learned it from the Buteyko technique. And what you do is, I explain first. You exhale, you close your nostrils, and then you move your head. So that gives you a bit of motion, and then you hold it till you will have a natural air hunger. And basically what happens is that there is an important mechanism in the body. But first, let's just show the exercise, and after that I explain why it's working, because that's another topic. One of the misconception about breathing, one of the biggest misconception, which is quite popular and actually causing many disease and lot of illnesses in the population. But first of all, so how do you unblock your nose? So exhale. Yeah, what I didn't say when you release your nose is to try not to grasp for a big air, but just try to keep it as natural and as slow, and just sniff air in as slowly as you can. Now, the way this works, that we create a oxygen deficit in the body, in the blood. That's why we exhale, that's why we close, that's why we move. So that's a bit more movement. So we have the air hunger earlier. And what the nose does is a natural response, that it opens up the veins, the vein, the whole structure opens up more. And because of that, it unblocks, because the blockage is nothing else but this kind of, like, we have little valves or gates inside, and especially if we overbreathe, then these things close. So did it work for you?
Yeah, I think it did, definitely. Yeah, it cleared my passages. Yeah,
because the thing is, we're using these sprays, and it's so easy to get addicted, in terms of it unblocks for 4 to 8 hours, but after that it gets worse. Right. So you kind of need to use it. I was addicted for like 6 months, and then I said, okay, I'm gonna stop. Unfortunately, I learned this breathing much later. So
it's cool though. I think it's really exciting to know that there's so many different things that you can use the breath for, and like I say, it can be optimized for our benefit, because it's such an important part of our, well, it's the breath of life. Literally, it's what gives us life, and if we take it for too much for granted, we're not getting the most out of it, out of this life-giving thing. Have you ever heard that notion that where the top and the bottom of the breath, i.e. the points where you're not breathing in or out, that's almost like a death, that you die every time you breathe out and breathe in? Have you heard this?
I heard, but it was more subconscious. I think it wasn't. I didn't digest it, so I'm curious.
Yeah, well, yeah. Unfortunately, I've opened this kind of worms, and I'm not too 100% sure on it myself. But yeah, it's this idea that obviously when we're respiring, when we're exhaling or inhaling, that's an action of life. We bring in life and then we release life, and it's after that exhale we're in a state of death. That there's a and we so and the positive spin on it is every time you breathe in, you create yourself. You can recreate yourself. You are starting again. This idea that every exhale is a death and every inhale is breathing new life into yourself. So whatever's happening, you're only one more breath away from starting again, from recreating yourself. And I like that.
Yeah. And connected to that, it makes sense. What's really interesting that they also say, like, the inhale is so we are in different consciousness in an inhale and in an exhale. So it's very subtle. So these things what we're talking about, these are very subtle, but if you really breathe consciously and observe it for a longer period of time, you can notice that when you inhale, you're much more receptive to things. You can pick up new ideas, and when you exhale, that's when you release things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it's similar. Yeah, I think similar idea. I suppose, and I like that. Yeah, that we're in different consciousnesses, because it's true, isn't it?
Yeah.
One's a release, one's the end of something, and one's the start of something.
Yeah, it's so natural. We're doing it all the time that we are not aware of it. And what you just said before, it's like it's also the kind of the pause between the minutes, or the pause between the thoughts. So that little death is when there is almost like a pause between the thoughts, but we don't really.
Yeah, and what just came to me, it's almost like it's the death, but it's because it's the death of the self, because in those moments we are 100% present and connected to the flow of life. We are just one. Because once you breathe out, and in that moment of before you breathe in again, there is no thought, there is nothing other than awareness, and that is a death of self, and then we breathe back in again, and we're ourselves again, and we're back into I.
It makes complete sense.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is that the death of self is only scary for the self. So once you're there, if it's meditation, if it's the 3 principles, and you just got into that moment or place or whatever, it's also called emptiness in Buddhism. When you see that things empty of names, labels, concepts, they just exist, it's not scary at all. You don't lose really anything. The only thing you lose is your ego, but you don't lose that because you kind of see that as a thing, but things will be empty of labels. It's interesting that we got here, but I think that's kind of unique to our webinars, that we always kind of have this as a main topic.
Well, the way for me it has to be, because it's the root of existence. It's the root of everything. It's the truth behind life. So all roads lead to this point. This truth that we are all connected and we are all one, and it's only the stories and the labels, or whatever labels you want to put on the labels, so whether you want to call them beliefs or stories or ego or whatever it is, it's only those things that keep us away from being connected and pure and one and living in truth, and breathing takes us back to that point, because that's the point we're all looking for, is peace, I think. you know.
Yeah. And it's interesting, for example, if I speak with a client or if I'm in that place myself and just start breathing, just simply breathing. Uh, Sometimes I'm like, before a coaching session, things happen in life. I'm like thinking like, how will I able to hold a coaching session like this? And then we start the session, we start breathing, and I'm fully there. So it's like, it's amazing. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
So have you been through the Wim Hof method yourself?
Yes, I was doing it for a while. Uh, I didn't do it for a long time, but I was researching quite a lot. I was researching a lot of different methods, and I was doing it too. Uh, One of the like very early simple benefits of doing the Wim Hof method, especially with the cold exposure exercise, like warm and cold
Uh-huh.
shower, is that it wakes you up. It's similar like you would go out for a good run, but it's a bit different in a way that it's like you get a clear head. You woke up and you got a clear head. So it clears the mind. It helps alleviate depression and also building up the immune system. So you
Mm.
just feel more energized. And so the steps doing it is that, for example, when you wake up, there is an app for it, so you can do through the app as well, or you just do hyperventilation first, like 30 breathing. So it's like that. And what you basically do is, actually it's explained wrong by Wim Hof. Sorry to say that, but doing research, it turned out that he says that you oxygenate your body. That's just half truth. You oxygenate your blood, but because there is too much oxygen in the blood, it's stuck in the blood.
Right.
It won't get into the body. So what you do, you deprive yourself from oxygen, your body from oxygen, but you fill your blood up with oxygen with the hyperventilation.
Uh-huh.
And when after that you do the and then you stop. You stop breathing and you hold it as much as you can. You fight with the air hunger, you fight with your instincts, and you just hold as long as you can. Now, what happens then is that uh, carbon dioxide naturally builds up in the body, air hunger builds up, and all the oxygen gets released into the body. So then you get a rush of oxygen. So that's the part when all the thoughts just disappear for a few seconds. All the thoughts just disappear. You feel a rush of uh, dopamine, and adrenaline. So that's how it works. And then you go to do the cold exposure. Cold and some people do only cold. Some people do cold and warm, like changing shower.
Mm.
And after that or before that, you do some stretching exercises, handstand and stretching exercises.
Yeah.
Now, if you do this every morning, it gives you a really good kick for the day. So you will feel fully energized, you oxygenated your body. It's really cool. And you can do this exercise with push-ups. And because you oxygenated your blood with the hyperventilation and then you stop and you do the push-ups, you can do much more. So
Mm.
people who were able to do 20 before can do like 40, 50. It's really interesting. Athletes actually use this. They dope with like um, they take out the blood and they re-inject before uh, the event. Basically, what happens is that when you have more red blood cells in the blood, then you can take up and you can utilize more oxygen. So that's why when athletes go up to the mountains and spend a week there training, because there is less oxygen, the body adapts. There is something called EPO adaptation, which means that EPO adaptation means that when the oxygen is lower, EPO increases. I think it's a hormone, and it goes into the red bone marrow and increases the amount of red blood cells created. And because you will have higher amount of red blood cells, you will be able to take up more oxygen. And because of that, you will be more efficient. Now, if you go down from the mountains, then for a week or so, you will have higher performance. Now, the Buteyko breathing, what we were doing that's part of it. The Buteyko breathing is basically how to restrict, or how to like slow down and make more and more gentle and smaller our breathing. And as our breathing becomes smaller, basically an EPO adaptation happens. Because, for example, asthma is nothing else just because of, I mean, I don't know all types of asthma, but Buteyko is really good for curing asthma because it's very often about a hidden hyperventilation. So people hiddenly hyperventilate. They don't know, but they just breathe in too much air. And because they breathe in too much air, basically they deprive themselves from oxygen, if that makes sense. So, yeah.
Well, I get that. I mean, I have mild asthma, so I have an inhaler for it. But I didn't always have an inhaler, and if I don't have an inhaler on me, and I get an asthma attack, I did realize quite a long time ago that I could self-medicate without the inhaler by really focusing on my breathing, by taking in deeper breaths and by holding it, and that stopped the asthma.
Yes. So if you hold it, it works because you build up CO2. So what people don't, we always talk about oxygen, but actually it works the other way around. In the air, there's 200 times more oxygen than we need. And 0.2 times less, or like CO2, what we actually need. So we always have an abundance of oxygen. Maybe if you go to the mountains, there is a more higher quality of air, but we always have an abundance of oxygen. So as in the Taoist text written, it's like the master breathes like he is not breathing. So a good breath cannot be really seen, cannot be really heard. It's just so slow, so gentle. So what the whole Buteyko method is about is to make the breathing so small, deep, in sense that you use your full lungs, but so small and so low as possible. And there are many martial art techniques where basically you do the same thing, that you slow down your breathing, you train yourself to be able to keep without air as long as you can. For example, pranayama is as I understand, like I'm just talking about the practical part, because like I don't know all the like the spiritual depth of it, but it's like one, learning to use every part of your lung, strengthening the muscles, the breathing muscles, and two, train to make the breathing as slow as possible, so you breathe more efficient. So what you do in pranayama, I mean, there are many techniques, but the basic technique is that you simply breathe, hold, exhale, and hold in different patterns, and you train to do it longer and longer and longer, and because of that your health will improve.
Makes sense. Yeah. I like that idea that the good breath isn't seen.
No.
Yeah, it's a very it's a, because that's the thing, isn't it? The breaths that are seen are the ones that are very short, very up here. The ones down here don't need to be. That's that difference between breathing up here and then breathing down here. That makes all the difference. I think for me is when I really first started to understand that and started to, as I say, develop my default breathing patterns to be much more in my belly. It does have a massive effect on your day-to-day, well-being.
Yeah, and it's basically it's the natural way of breathing. So it's the way how infants and when people are in deep meditation breathe.
Yeah.
It's just into the stomach and really slow. There is almost no breathing. It's really slow, and it's really deep. Now, what you can see in some yoga classes, I'm not talking about every, I'm just talking about some, when they say like, and take big breath in and out, and they do it for an hour. And they also say like, you have the tingling because you not get used to oxygen. Now that's not true. You get the tingling because your brain is deprived of oxygen. um, and 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 that's not healthy breathing. Now it's okay to breathe like that for a while. So for example, what I do with clients is that, and myself, is that we take big breath. So it's fine to do it for a minute or so, because the other part is that it can clean a lot of stuff out. So for example, after crying, how we breathe up here, because here are the emotions stored. Like it's really interesting. And so there is in breath work, and I did this once with a client, is like he was laying down and he was basically hyperventilating, and we went back to an early experience. And if you hyperventilate and if you breathe, like not necessarily like this, but you take full breath in, full breath out, full breath in, full breath out. So it's then what happens is that the gates of emotions open up. So when you fully inhale and fully exhale, the gates of emotion open up. So everything, it's not like breathing is good or bad. Different kind of breathing has different purpose and applications. And he started to crying, and all of these things came up, and it was basically a therapy session. So it's really interesting that we naturally do these kind of breathing in different life situations. Making love, working out, meditation, sleeping. Now the problem is when the basic pattern is changed to shallow stress breathing, so shallow and fast. When the basic pattern changes, that's hidden hyperventilation, and that has a huge effect on the body. Yeah. For example, when kids learn to breathe through the mouth. Now, one basic thing is if you just learn breathing through the nose, you're already halfway to health. Now, when kids learn breathing through the mouth because of stress and changed environment and other factors, their face won't develop and their intellect won't develop the same way. The jaw drops back, the nose gets crooked, and their brain won't develop. So it literally can make children uglier. It's strange, but it can have these kind of physical effects. So and less intelligence. I think they even have the expression that mouth breather.
Yeah.
Right. If someone is stupid or dull. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So breathing through the nose, that's the main organ of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I can relate to that. Well, just tell a story briefly. I went to a really sort of difficult breakup with a girl about 10 years ago, and I had about 3 months where I really sort of was in a dark place and everything was going, I was, self-medicating with various things, and it was just not a nice time. And then I remember the day I felt like I was getting over it, I was in the bath and I just breathed out, and it felt like it was the first time I'd breathed out properly in about 3 months. And I really noticed that, I'm breathing again. And that, relates to what you just said, really. When we're up in our throat and our upper chest, that's where all the emotions are, that's where all the stress is. And that's where I was living for that amount of time. And I remember really vividly going, I feel like I haven't breathed out properly in so long. And it felt good, and it felt like that I'd turned a corner at that point, And I think that was a natural release from my emotions. But if we are more in tune with our breathing, more aware of what's going on, you can change your physiology through your breath, and that helps to release the emotions quicker. The emotions left, and with it the breath for me. But if I'd known perhaps more about breath work, I could have released it sooner by allowing my breathing to go there first and the emotions to follow. One of my favorite sayings ever, it's easier to act your way into a new way of thinking than think your way into a new way of acting. So true. It's always true.
So you don't have to feel like, but you can act like.
Yeah. And you start to think differently when you act differently, because that's a fact. It's this idea that, in the personal development world, just briefly, because I know we're running out of time here, but we think that you have the food pyramid where like all the really important stuff is at the bottom and all the sort of lower stuff is at the top. And I think with personal development, we think that thinking is the bottom bit that's the most important, and that the action's at the top. That we have to have the thinking right before we can do the action.
I love that.
Whereas it's the other way around, that it's the thinking that's at the top and it's the action that's at the bottom. We don't need the thinking to be perfect for us to take the action we need.
We should do this for the group.
Yeah.
Let's have a talk about it, and I do the graphics.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. Yeah, let's not get into that tangent now, but maybe it's for the next webinar. But are we done for today? Do you think there's anything else you want to add?
I think that's it.
Yeah, it's been really good. I felt it's been a good one today. I've certainly learned things. I feel like some nice techniques that people can try if you're watching this on the replay. So thank you for watching. It's been great to have you here again, and there'll be another webinar along in the next 2 weeks. So stay tuned. Cheers, Victor. See you later.
See ya. Bye.